starting tomorrow, Thursday, January the 13th, I had to double check the date then, Akoostica are back with open mic nights at Pydar Pop-Up in Truro. We've got Bert Biscoe with us now to tell us more. Hi Bert, thanks for coming on the show today.
How are you?
We're well, thank you.
Pleased to see you.
Yeah, pleased to see you too. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Before we get right into it, I've got to admit something. I've had a quick little look up of you, and you are a very interesting chap, I must say.
Right. Well, you may say that.
Well, you have an interesting sort of backstory, a bit of history to you, and it was all very interesting. But I won't go into that. I'm not going to probe you. I'm not going to do any of that kind of stuff live on air. Don't worry about that. So, but obviously, a former mayor of Truro, councillor, local activist, and a talented musician. Could you tell us just a little bit, as much time as you may have, about yourself? Because obviously, there's lots to tell.
Oh, about me. Well, I was brought up in Stithians. I went to school in Truro. I went to a Catholic convent. Then I sang in a Church of England choir. And I went to a Methodist school after that. So I've had an ecumenical upbringing. I went off and played in rock and roll bands for 15 years or so,
Wow.
touring the country, not getting anywhere, but going a lot of places in the process. And then I came back to Truro and tried to hire Truro City Hall to put a gig on, and found that it was an incredibly complicated business, and found myself sitting on Truro City Council as a result.
Oh, flipping heck.
And that was about 30 some odd years ago. And then I sat on Carrick Council for a bit, and then I was elected to Cornwall Council for a bit, and now I'm still back on Truro City Council. And I run Akoostica. I'm the chairman of the Civic Society. I write poetry. I take people on historical walks around the town, and wander up and down the street talking to myself, sometimes quite merrily.
I mean, I think
That sounds a lot like me wandering up and down the street talking to myself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we can all relate to that last one.
Well, I found that about 30 years ago, I gave up drinking. And when I gave up drinking, I found that the two voices in my internal conversation began to understand what each other were talking about. It made it slightly more interesting than it used to be.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting way of putting it. I quite like that.
So we know that you've got a keen interest in Cornish history. How does that blend with your political and activist career?
Well, I don't think that anybody really can be effective in strategic terms in providing political guidance and support and advice to a place unless they have a firm footing in the history of the place, because you need to know where you've been in order to work out where you're going, really. And I think that if you represent a place, which is what I've done for a long time, then along the way, you have to be able to describe to other people who don't know why it is that you are where you're at. And so therefore, the two things really rather go together, I think, politics and history.
You know what?
Yeah.
Our question for the
I
nation.
hope that's the case. Otherwise, I've wasted a lot of time.
Well, you know what? Our question for the nation today is quite a hot button topic. It's political. It should we fire the PM? I say you need to be PM, because that is a beautiful way you've described it there. Absolutely. You need to learn the lessons of the past, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you need to also understand what the challenges of the future are as well. Yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, when you walk down the street, you look behind you to see where you've been, and you look in front of you to see where you're going, and you occupy the space you're in. And you know, whether you're walking down the street or whether you're the Prime Minister, the same basic thing applies, you know.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You know what? We need more people to think the way you do, because that's beautiful.
Be careful what you're saying.
That's not the reply I was expecting there.
You may be alone in that thought.
Well, but obviously we've got you on today to talk about the Akoostica open mic evenings.
Oh, yeah.
When did you start these?
Well, actually, Loic Rich and I started it in a little wine bar, which is now a tapas bar in Old Bridge Street. And we just thought we'd have a go and see what happened. And it took off really quickly. And then we had to stop doing it there. And we went to the Compton Castle And Loic clearly went off and did other things, so he turns up now and again, but we don't see him every week. And I really got into running it. I really enjoy it. And so we were on the Compton Castle for 2 or 3 years, I suppose, and that was really very enjoyable. And Larry and his partner were extremely friendly and helpful to us, and very accommodating. Then we had to come off the boat for various reasons, and we've been in the Pydar Pop-Up ever since.
Amazing. So, what made you want to start the sessions?
Well, I like playing, and I wanted somewhere to play, and if you know, it's a good place for people to meet each other and to enjoy collaborating, making music. I mean, part of making music is about listening to other people, and part of it's about playing with other people and different people. And it's a social thing, you know, as much as anything, but very musical. And I think one of the great beauties of Akoostica is that an awful lot of the people who come through and play at it and entertain people do actually bring new stuff that they want to put in front of people to find out how it is. They strike up relationships with people and then produce new music between them, and they try out things and then ask their colleagues, their peers, if you like, what they think of them. And at the same time, it's also a place where people play music for lots and lots of different reasons. I mean, they play it to be, you know, great superstars, and they play it because it's therapeutic, and they play it because they love it. And sometimes they play it because it won't leave them alone. And all those people find, no matter what their condition or you know, their level of ability is, they find safe haven in Akoostica and a welcome. And I think that's really important. So I think that as well as being a musical arena, we're also a bit of a place which provides some friendship, some comfort, some support to people who otherwise wouldn't find it easily. So it's a bit of a social service as well as being a bit of a musical service.
You're definitely interested me in this. I mean, how many times have I said at home, because I play the piano and dabble in a couple of other bits and bobs. How many times have I said I'd love to have someone here who can play something else with me? I mean, you play a bit of ukulele with me now and again, don't you?
Badly. I play ukulele very badly.
But that's the kind of thing that I've never been able to have growing up playing instruments, and this sounds perfect for...
Well, it's a great place to come and you know, I mean, it's a great place to come and to take part in. It's a great place to come and just listen, because there's a huge variety of stuff. You know, I mean, you can go from sort of New York avant-garde jazz, or acoustic, naturally, all the way through to a little bit of chamber music or South American classical guitar, all the way through to improvised therapeutic blues, whatever you know. It's all in there. It's good. It's fun. We also because during lockdown we weren't doing it live. We started out doing something called Akoostica, and the regulars, as it were all making little films, little videos, and submitting to Molly, my daughter. And they were submitting their videos each week, and she was putting together like a half-hour program, which went out on YouTube called Akoostica. And they're all still available on somewhere on YouTube. I'm not quite sure where. And then we moved on from that, and we started, because Zoom became very available, and we started doing Zoom Akoostica. And then people were coming down. Whilst we've been doing Zoom Akoostica, we've got a regular customer, Susan, who comes from Manchester. We've got another chap, Bob, who comes in from Kentucky to play, and he plays on a regular basis. And we've had visitors from Canada and New York and all up in England and wherever. And we do get people coming along, which is lovely, you know. So there's a sort of the Zoomies sit on a screen on the wall, and I put them through the PA if they're going to play. And then they can listen to the people who are playing live as well. So there's a real interesting interaction between the digital world and the real world, as it were, which is kind of entertaining.
That's so
amazing.
amazing.
Thanks to Zoom.
Yeah. I think a lot of us kind of fail to remember sort of how hard it is to find your community. But now with like being able to use Zoom and Facebook and things like that, you can find your people that are interested in the same things as you, no matter where they are.
And I love how you're getting such a wide variety of people from around the world.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Yeah, it's an international open mic session, global open mic session.
Absolutely brilliant. I love the variety as well, as you just described there, being played. I want to move on something now, a little bit different, but definitely it's something I wanted to mention as well. It's wonderful because you have such a passion for the Cornish language, I believe. Do you incorporate this into your music?
Not particularly. No, I'm not really a linguist, and I don't really speak Cornish. I can use a few phrases in Cornish, which I deploy when I'm very, very strongly committed to making sure that Cornish is on an evolutionary track to becoming the community language that it should be in a very, very special place. But I would support anybody who's campaigning for any aspect of that, and I have done over the years. I'm really I believe that one of the rights of people is to be able to speak freely in the language that they wish to speak in, no matter where they are. Clearly, if you're going to use a language, you've got to be able to communicate with people. So it's got to be a language that's going to help you to communicate. But accepting that for a minute, and I think that's a human right. And I think there are human rights which should be available to all people, which in some cases, because some minorities have suffered exclusion and suppression and a degree of depression as the result of the way that history has treated them over the years. I think that it's really important, if people are going to be happy and confident and fulfilled, that they feel that they can be fully and uninhibitedly themselves, and therefore I believe that speaking the Cornish language is the human right, but I also believe there are other rights, and so therefore I'm one of the people who's involved in something called the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. And in June of 2014, the government recognised the Cornish as a national minority. And since then, we have seen a significant change in the way in which Cornish people express themselves, in the resources that are coming towards Cornish culture, Cornish art, Cornish language, and so on. And I think that you're seeing Cornwall flourish. And I think one of the great beauties of that is that the sense of being Cornish, the self-identification as being Cornish, is very, very strong amongst young people. And no culture, no language is going to find a future unless the young take it there.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got some very lovely ways of getting information across. And I've got to agree as well. I personally have seen a lot more youngsters, a lot more Cornish youngsters, maybe more in the teenage years, sort of getting a little bit more in touch with their roots, looking a bit more into the history, where they've come from, what Cornwall is, where it's going. And it is really lovely to see that. I'm Cornish myself. I remember when that happened. Was it back in 2014, you said? I do remember that, and it sort of made me think I need to think a bit more about my roots. I'm proud of being Cornish, but when I'm actually asked about it, I think, well, actually, I can't say much about it. So maybe I do need to look into it a bit more. And it's lovely to have someone like yourself talking so passionately and so positively about it, but also realistic as well. I want to bring this back, if you don't mind, to the open mic sessions. I think the first one is tomorrow evening at 8 p.m.
It's tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock at the Pydar Pop-Up. Most people will probably recognise the Pydar Pop-Up as being Hardy's Carpets, right. Which is in St Clement Street, which is the road that comes from the station around to the Trafalgar roundabout. You go past it on the way. So it's one of the old shops on the Pydar Street site. It doesn't look much, but when you get inside, it's very friendly, and actually the sound's quite good.
Brilliant. So what's on the agenda? Can anyone turn up? How do the sessions work? Yeah. I run a list. First come, first served. If you picture, we go from 8 o'clock till roughly 10:30. So, I try and match everybody up so there's a bit of a flow to it. One or two people will play off of Zoom, and others will play live. And we're never short of people to play. That's amazing. I mean, absolutely brilliant. And also well done to everyone who does turn up and play, because I personally get a massive amount of stage fright around this kind of thing, and absolutely brilliant.
Well, I think one of the things that Akoostica has done and does is to sort of help people to deal with that issue, because it is a real issue. And several of the people who've come through or come to Akoostica from time to time have blossomed as a result. I had one chap who I'm very fond of, who turned up, who turned up and said, "Well, I never really play in my bedroom," and about 12 months later, he was turning up with a 3-piece band.
Oh, flipping heck.
I God knows how they all got into his bedroom, but he had really truly blossomed. The other thing is that one of our most stalwart followers, who's Chris Medlin, is also the leader of Truro City Band, and so we've got that link through Chris with Truro City Band. And I think that, and also I have to say that Mike Williams, although he's coming on Zoom at the moment because he's still quite vulnerable around COVID, but Mike Williams, when we were on the boat, he used to run a ukulele school.
Oh, amazing!
Before every session, and then they'd all learn a tune and then come and play at Akoostica. So we'd have 15 or 20 what are they called? Ukulele players, all bashing out. Now, one of those ukulele players has gone on to actually play more seriously and is doing really, really well.
Oh,
she's amazing. Part of the Stokes Road Light Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
From Hendra.
This is amazing. It's lovely to see this be so many people, either in Cornwall or out of Cornwall, coming to Cornwall and being nurtured. And it shows how well it's working, because people are going back out into the world, spreading joy, doing well for themselves. And it's just all generally positive.
Yeah. I think one other point to make is that it spans generations as well. So I've got a chap who comes who's really, really, really good accordion player, and I'm not quite sure how old he is, but he's certainly in his mid to late 70s.
Wow.
And I've got young people coming who are in their teens, which is great, and all stops in between.
Oh, that's but well, music does that, doesn't it? It brings people together.
It's a global language.
Absolutely perfect. I love
that. Love and harmony.
Brings it back to language. That's beautiful. Now, Bert, it gets annoying asking these questions, but I know we need to. How has COVID impacted things, and how have you guys adapted? You've talked about Zoom, obviously.
I find we keep people are very sensible in the way in which they interact. We are confronted at the moment. We've got an old shop which has been donated to run as a community centre for a bit, and it's got one major failing, and that is it's got no heating in it, so we have to deal with that issue. People are very sensible. People will wear masks if they're not playing. People distance in the room, and so on, and we sign people in and out. So
fantastic. Well,
yeah.
But
I mean, we didn't run for the full lockdown, but I believe that you've got to allow people to have a bit of common sense as well. So.
Of course. But I would like to ask you one question. This is completely from me. Something I found. I did find out one thing about you, and it tickled me. Am I right in saying that you are officially a bard?
Pydar Pop-Up is my real name.
That's right. I've got it up here in front of me. Could you tell us a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind, of course?
Well, Pydar Pop-Up means travels with words. Or I won't tell you what the other translation is because we're on TV. But bards are elected by other bards to join the Gorseth. The Gorseth was rekindled in 1928 after a significant period of time. It used to come together in medieval times, and it was brought together because after the First World War, there was a great flowering of interest in Cornish culture, and people like Morton Nance and Henry Jenner and a man called Lax Screamer, who was the curate at St Paul's Church in Truro, and A.A. Clinic, who was the first president of Truro Old Cornwall Society. They came together. Truro's celebrating its centenary this year as an Old Cornwall Society, and they formed the Old Cornwall Societies, and about 10 years, in 1928, 8 years later, the first Gorseth was held at Boscoe which is down in Penwith, and it has convened every year since. During the Second World War, it convened in the museum in Truro. And it basically celebrates the spirit of Arthur and the spirit of Cornwall. And it celebrates creativity, endeavour, contribution, and achievement in things that are quintessentially Cornish. Whether they're unique to Cornwall or typical of Cornwall, I think is an important point. And the College of Bards, there's about 400 bards living, and there have been since 28 just over 1,000 bards. And they cover a very wide spectrum of activity and interest. We have several bards who are elected to the College of Bards who live in America and Australia, Africa, and New Zealand, and other places. So the Cornish diaspora is represented as well. And every now and again, somebody goes off and holds a bardic ceremony in America. I did one in Minnesota some years ago, which was standing around in blue robes in the middle of a field in Minnesota. It does excite some interest, which is not about being a bard, I can tell you. But anyway, and it basically works for the good of Cornish culture. And I think that in that sense, it is the leading Cornish cultural institution.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
I love that.
So we are both people that are very interested in medieval themed things. Adam goes to LARP, live action role play. We both play Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. And when we read Bard, we were really interested.
Like an actual real bard. We can actually find out what a real bard is.
So let me tell you something about medieval.
Okay.
And that is that this evening at 6:30, a lady called Fiona Fleming, who is an archaeologist who works for Cornwall Archaeological Unit, is going to give a talk on Zoom about what we have discovered as a result of all the property developments that have taken place around Truro over the last 30 or 40 years. And she's going to try and describe what the medieval landscape looked like. And that's going from prehistory all the way through to the 13th century, which is truly the medieval period. If you go up to where the car park where Waitrose is and the recycling centre, under the recycling centre, they discovered what they called a causewayed enclosure, which they thought was a henge. And they also discovered a game scratched on a tablet of stone. And most importantly, they discovered a flint knapping pit. That is where Stone Age people made their tools. Wow. And what that shows is that Truro was inhabited and grafting, working, manufacturing in the Neolithic period. Which is before medieval, and she's going to talk about that. And then the Earl Reginald's Charter for Truro, which is currently on display at Crescent Kernow in Redruth, if you want to go and see it. It's a scrap of paper, 3 inches wide, 1 inch deep. And I can tell you that Earl Reginald should have gone to a better school because his handwriting is lousy. It's almost illegible. But in there is the charter, is the piece of paper, the sentences which created Truro, the town, the civic entity of Truro, a place which could hold markets. Now that was given to Truro in 1154. So Fiona is going to go from the prehistoric through to roughly the moment when we got the charter, and that's at 6:30 this evening. If you want a link, you want to come and join the lecture, which is free, and you're very, very welcome. Then go to the Truro Civic Society website, which is www.trurocivicsociety.com, and you'll find the link on the website, and that'll get you into the talk.
That's amazing.
I'd be delighted to see you.
I can't explain how full of glee that's made me. The place you were just describing, by the way, is just across the road from us.
Yeah.
Literally just across the road.
Yes. But that's not all. That's not all. I mean, there's more. There's more to it than just Waitrose.
But thank you so much for popping in and having a chat with us. I mean, I knew we were going to get some really good information, but wow. You've really gone above and beyond. It's absolutely amazing. We'd have to get you on to talk more about your work because you're so interesting. You've got such a massive amount of interesting information. We've actually got a short video now with some performances, bringing it back to the Akoostica
great.
sessions over the years to give us a bit of a taste.
Suddenly the night has grown colder. The god of love preparing to depart. Alexandra hoisted on his shoulder. They slip between the centuries of the heart. Upheld by the simplicities of pleasure.
I remember when I was a young boy, standing at my granny's knee. She told me her adventure when she sailed across the sea.
Absolutely brilliant. We're still gleaming here with that chat. What an interesting bloke he is. I could have spent all day quite happily chatting, but more listening to what he's got to say. The amount of passion he's got, the way he looks at politics, the way he looks at music, Cornish history, but also the future. Brilliant. Anyway, massive thank you to Bert there. Really, really did enjoy that.